Discarded Beasts, File 4, Mist. After Llewellyn had given their introduction to Cleta, the two spent a moment discussing what to do going forward, with Cleta asking when Llewellyn would be free to show her the property, and Llewellyn explaining she was free all day, ready to go at a moment's notice. Cleta was overjoyed to hear this and quickly made her way to her room to get ready for the trip. She put on her nicest and only set of boots before heading back to the inn lounge, where Llewellyn was waiting. The two set off towards the property, with Llewellyn leading the way. It was quite foggy out, which should have made navigation hard, but Llewellyn seemed to know exactly where she was headed. Yet, despite having no clue where they were going to go, Cleta was hopeful and excited to see the property. A few times throughout the trek, Cleta attempted to make small talk with Llewellyn, asking about what the property was like, where it was, or if anyone else lived nearby. However, Llewellyn would only answer with, "You will learn when we get there," which caused Cleta to slowly begin to build up a sense of anticipation. Surely, she thought, if the property was secretive, it must be something excellent, a high-value piece of land Llewellyn could only fail to sell because of its value, right? It's a good thing she probably had enough to purchase another home in her wallet that was right in her coat pocket. As if to reaffirm this to herself, she patted her pocket, only to feel the empty fabric fall against her undershirt. Her expression went blank as she realized the wallet was not in her pocket. Quickly patting herself down, she realized that she was in fact walletless. Llewellyn, I don't have my wallet," Cleta embarrassedly stated. She was in such a rush that she left without her sister's wallet. However, Llewellyn didn't stop moving forward. They just turned towards Cleta, stating, "You won't need a wallet for this," before continuing forwards. Cleta sighed in relief, glad she didn't just embarrass herself for lacking a wallet. There was not another word spoken between the two until they reached their destination. Cleta didn't want to distract Llewellyn from the journey throughout the fog, especially not once they began to climb up what seemed to be a mountain. As the two made their way up, Llewellyn took a moment to sniff the air before turning away, clearly being grossed out by some strange scent as she had been earlier that day. She just silently followed until eventually Llewellyn stopped in what seemed to be a large clearing. Cleta could only barely see the property thanks to the fog, so she assumed the house was nearby and just hidden from her view. "Hey, where's the house?" Cleta asked curiously. "That's exactly what I wanted to ask you about." As Llewellyn spoke, their expression grew into a stone-cold stare. They pulled out what happened to be a sword with a scabbard fastened to their pants, unsheathed it, and slashed at the air, forcing the fog to dissipate within a small radius of where the two stood. The pair were standing about 540 inches away from Cleta's old home, looking just as ruined as it was when she left. Cleta's eyes grew wide as her heart was gripped with fear. She couldn't believe what was happening to her. You're trying to scam me into buying my own house? How could you? I thought you were better than this, Llewellyn." Cleta cried out in pain from the betrayal she felt. Llewellyn's stare turned to a dumbfounded expression. "What? You still think I'm trying to sell you a house? After all the clues I let slip, you still don't get it?" Cleta could only reply with a small, "Nope, sorry about that," which caused Llewellyn to groan. "Then listen up and listen well. I'm a detective from the QK Regiment. I was requested to investigate what caused a recent mining expedition to go silent. And when I get to the dig site, instead of finding the miner I was looking for, all that's left is a collapsed home and a dead excavator. Can you explain what took place here?" As Llewellyn finished the question, they pointed their sword at Cleta, who raised her hands above her head in a surrendering gesture. "I was just defending myself when it broke into my house," she lied, attempting to absolve herself of any blame, but it was clear Llewellyn would not be buying it. Pausing for a moment and silently looking at Cleta, Llewellyn decided they had knew enough to take action. Regardless of why they did this, you can't just hide away from your punishment. Your smell gave you away. Cleta took a moment to sniff herself before bluntly stating she didn't smell anything strange. Llewellyn just sighed before asking, "Do you think we're stupid? You reek of rust, just as this whole mining site does. Who else would have lived here if not the one who smells the same as the site? You oxidized, odored idiot. Do you think just because you killed a flesh machine that you are above consequences?" Cleta tried to answer, but in a single swift motion, Llewellyn dashed across the field before raising her sword to strike. Not wanting to be sliced into Cleta strips, she quickly blocked the attack with a blast of ice that fired from her factor, shooting it into the sky and surprising Llewellyn long enough for Cleta to move out of slicing distance. Llewellyn tried to close the gap and swing at Cleta. However, they were unable to, as Cleta quickly shot a second blast underneath their shoe, causing them to slip and flip over, landing crouched behind Cleta with their sword embedded in the dirt. As Llewellyn stood up, Cleta tried to end the fight by pleading, "Hey, couldn't we just talk this out? I would really rather not kill you," which not only failed to end the fight, but seemed to only serve to increase how angry Llewellyn felt at that moment, with them then asking, "Do you believe yourself above me?" before launching back into the fight. They slashed in a downwards arc towards Kalida's midsection, attempting to slice her in two. There were several attempts. Kalida was nearly cut, but she managed to dodge every slash in quick succession. Kalida really didn't want to have to kill anyone else so soon. She tried to disable Leland by firing a tiny blast of ice at their eye. The ice chunk hit its target directly, but did no real damage, which caused Leland to stumble back in mild discomfort as she rubbed her eye, and their expression changed from vague annoyance to rage. At that moment, Leland swapped from wanting Kalida dead to wanting her to suffer. They prepared to swing their sword once more. However, instead of a slash, they attempted to hit Kalida, moving their arm as if they were making another swing. Then the second Kalida dodged, they smashed her face in with the blunt edge of the sword. Not only did they succeed in hitting, but they hit hard enough to send Kalida onto the ground. As blood dripped from her mouth, Leland loomed over the witch, with their foot on the ice-firing finger. You got lucky with a few hits, but you never stood a chance against us. Who stands above whom now? Leland coldly asked before raising their sword to swiftly finish the witch off. However, before they could bring their justice upon her, Kalida came up with a plan and quickly acted on it. Taking in the deepest breath she could, Kalida first spat all the blood in her mouth at Leland before turning it to ice the moment it made contact with Leland's mouth. The ice in her throat knocked them off balance and forced them to the ground, gagging and coughing up all that came from their esophagus. Kalida quickly rose to her feet and took a moment to catch her breath before picking up the now discarded sword. As Leland sat crouched trying to spit out the ice, the Red Witch swiftly approached with the sword in hand. Her face as cold as the ice she creates. Leland tried to get away, but Kalida stopped them from making any progress by tossing the sword back to Leland, its blade landing firmly in the dirt. Leland, shocked to the core, got rid of the last of the ice as they stood. With their face in utter confusion, they could only look to the sword, then to Kalida, then back to the sword before asking, "Why?" Which Kalida could only respond by warmly stating, "You dropped this," while gesturing to the sword. The combatants took a moment to breathe, neither knowing how to break the silence that at one more placed itself on them. Till at last Leland shattered it with a simple question. "I never did you get your name. What is it?"